Okay, guys, we are here, and I am joined, and I'm not alone. I am joined by the handsomest man, except for Perkins, because I would never dare to say anything bad about Perkins, at Steve Forged. And we have Steve Margretson here.
Hey there, guys.
Yeah. And we are here to talk about, engineers.
Yes, engineers.
Yeah. And you have quite a lot of changes coming into this, this new season. So,
yeah.
But first of all, the changes to the season itself, the overall design idea for season 4, where would you say that is?
So, season 4, I think, as an overall idea, it's something as we developed it, and it's definitely pushing the game to probably be a bit quicker. It's probably a faster game, more damage is being dealt, there is more opportunity for goals and things like that. And I don't know if we necessarily went in with that as an original design intent, but it was something that, as we developed it, became more apparent. Then sort of the other, I would say, big thing throughout Season 4 is talking about and refining some of the bits in the game that perhaps, needed some work and so on. It's been a long time since we've had a full season update. It's 2 years, I believe. And as a result, there's a lot of stuff that, has been perhaps behind the curve or not working as intended, and a season like this is a great chance to fix a lot of the things that, are happening within the game that we don't think should be, and fixing things and hopefully giving people a new fun game to play with.
Yeah, that's very good. But specifically for engineers, there actually is a fair bit of changes. Some of them are more significant than others. Some are not changes you will see from the cards themselves.
Yeah.
But you will see them when you actually start playing the game from what both you say and the other little tidbits we've gotten so far.
Yes.
But I guess we can also sort of start with what was the goal with the changes to the engineers.
So engineers are, as much as there are a reasonable number of changes, and obviously certain cards have seen more than others, engineers are actually one of the guilds that we're fairly happy with. They had a redesign at the beginning of Season 3, and after that redesign and that rework, we were quite happy with them as a guild overall. They feel sort of working as intended. A lot of the work that we've put into engineers has been to bring players that perhaps are underplayed or players that are overplayed and sort of level the playing field a bit there. In terms of just the general design goals of the engineers is, I would say they're a resilient team that is very flexible because they have options to take models out and score goals. They have a range game, which is like there are other teams that do have elements of that, but engineers are by far the most range-focused guild in the game. Then the other thing is, in terms of their football abilities, they are the most accurate football guild, whereas other guilds perhaps have longer kicks and so on. The engineers consistently tend to roll the most dice and have access to other football-related abilities like close control.
Do you want to, for example, without actually saying anything about the card, tell me who has seen the most significant change?
So most significant change, I think, has to be Veteran Velocity.
I will say I am quite in agreement with that.
Yes. Yeah. I think
when it comes to, for example, how she is now and how she is now,
yeah.
Then she has seen a very significant change compared to where she was.
Yeah. Whereas I think most of the other models within the guild that have changed, I don't think their design has really changed. They've just generally gotten better, or have kept the same specific role. Whereas Velocity, spoilers for later, is quite different.
Yeah. Should we leave veteran velocity for last? That'd be cruel.
It might be cruel. I mean, I guess that's really all on you and whether you want to be known as the media outlet that was cruel to its viewers or not.
Well, I guess we'll see where we go from it.
Yeah.
It'll be one of the last ones, at least. It can be the last player, and that'll be fair enough. But anyways, we want to actually get into the specific cards at some point. I'm sure that's why people are watching this and starting to get annoyed at just watching our face at this point.
Yeah.
So let's have a go with that. Let's start with the small ones, the mascots. They have changed quite a bit, both of them. And do we have? Maybe we can have a go at the one that never sees any play whatsoever first, Mainspring.
Yep. So Mainspring. Mainspring's an interesting model because I don't think Mainspring in Season 3 is a bad model. The few times that, I go to a tournament and someone is playing Mainspring, I was always surprised at the amount he can do, and you think, oh, why is he not getting played? He seems really good. And one of the large reasons for that is Mother, who we'll come on to later, and how largely she overshadowed him. And stat-wise, I think he's pretty much identical. They picked up an additional kick die.
Stat-wise, he's got a kick extra. Beyond that, he is stat-wise exactly the same.
Yeah, and then the
playbook's a bit interesting. I would say that we have a completely new character play here.
Yes.
Which by itself looks a little overly redundant, but it would seem like this guy is supposed to... He's going to get the ball off you one way or the other.
Yeah, so the whole idea of his new character play, which is Thief, is we've taken Mainspring and we want him to be a model that is good at getting the ball off of models that are awkward to get the ball off of. And there are a few of them in the game, your close control models and things like that. And his character play Thief allows him to do that. So it's momentous there on the first column, and it basically just takes the ball off of that model, and Mainspring has it. Now, that in itself, it's a nice ability to get it off of certain models and so on, but the thing that really makes it good is when you look at on the back of his card, Launch Control, which he's always had, and it's always been a really good ability, is his ability to pass the ball and use Long Bomb without spending influence. So Mainspring with one influence can use this thief, take the ball off of someone, and then pass it 8 inches, with the four dice that he's rolling for accuracy. So he's good at repositioning the ball and then also taking the ball off of other models. And we felt like though he was useful previously of being able to go and collect the ball without spending influence, we wanted to give him another role, and also give him something that perhaps makes him stand out a little bit more against Mother. And then I think the last thing really that we can talk about a bit on his card, which is more a global change, is on Overheat. So Overheat has stayed largely the same. It still does damage, puts out the burning condition when Mainspring is taken out. But the one thing you will notice is that now, rather than being every model within the pulse, it's now just enemy models. And this is something you'll see across all of Season 4, is abilities like Overheat and other abilities in the guild like this will only trigger against enemy models. And this is because the way we view it is that this is an ability that you, as the player, don't get the choice of when you're going to activate it, because it's activated on the taken out condition. And we wanted to avoid that situation of where someone, for example, takes out Mainspring and then does it within your lines, you suffer the damage and the burning condition, and then you feel bad because you took Mainspring, because he actually ended up doing, affecting your team more than the opponent's team.
Yeah, potentially you just had the Mainspring killing half your team. But that would be not a nice experience, and certainly a good reason not to take her. Or him, or it, or the flea.
Yeah. And especially for a guild like Engineers, who are, not the fastest guild in the world, they don't want to be on fire.
Let's have a go at Mother.
The thing with Mother is another model that has not changed that much. Like, I feel like her role is very similar. There's just been a few tweaks here and there to bring her a bit more into line and make Mainspring a bit more viable, because Mother in Season 3 is an incredible model, and it's a very hard model to not take as your mascot choice within the guild. So
true. I see basically on the front, I see two changes. I see her defense is dropped to 3.
Yep. So
Burrow is changed.
Yep. So the defense drop was just to make her a bit a bit easier to kill, because she's a mascot that can score goals, particularly in, say, like a Pinvice team and so on. And it felt like at times you were using a reasonable amount of force to get rid of her if she goes up, scores a goal, and then she just sits there, ready to snapshot or collect the ball again. And though, 9 health, I think she was originally 9 health, let's check. Yeah, she was 9 health previously as well.
Yeah.
9 health 4-1 is not that much in the grand scheme of the game for a mascot, and particularly one that is potentially threatening another 4 points. It can be quite a big deal, and the 3-1 sort of lessens that impact a bit.
That is very true. So I would say there's the most significant changes to her is partially the change to Burrow.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is quite interconnected because of the identity of Mother. So Mother's whole thing are these nest markers and using Burrow, and it allows her to be a lot more mobile and get out of situations that normally another mascot would struggle to get out of. She can just place a nest marker and burrow out of there. Now, Burrow is a very strong rule in its Season 3 iteration, because you've got an attack as part of the free burrow, and it's one of those where the burrow is already a good rule without that attack, and we just made the decision to take it away as well, because it felt like you were paying 1 influence to get 2 influence worth of work out of her. Because not only are you getting to place her, but you are getting a free attack on top of that. And this also has implications other places in the guild, like, spoilers, Hoist, you will get to much later on. Then, in terms of the actual changes to the nests themselves, I think one of the other things that made Mother both good and potentially for other people playing against her a bit frustrating was these nest markers used to just stay on the board indefinitely. You had no way of interacting with them. They were just there blocking your way, and affecting your attack and so on, and you had no way to stop her getting where she wanted to go or suffering those negatives that they give. So we made the decision to, in terms of simplifying the game and also consistency, is that these spider nests, you can now, there is a bit of counterplay, you can now trample them by sprinting or charging over them like a harvest marker, which is one of those where it doesn't seem like a big change, but it's one that makes a player feel better because they have an option to interact with this model more, and the things she's doing, and the consistency of knowing that this marker is like a harvest marker I can run over, it is good for players that are newer to the game, and for players just generally, it works how you would expect it to work based on other markers within the game.
Very true. So it basically then changes a bit, streamlines the entire range a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Generally, quite a good thing. It still gives this penalty within if you look at the spiderlings one, basically the crowding out penalty,
Yes,
which is a good way of actually still keeping the identity fairly well, but still also making it a little less I think some people in VTC called it the best crowd out in the game.
It is pretty good, and I've definitely been guilty of in season 3 playing Ballista and surrounding him with these markers and just being like, okay, I've got Fort Ballista here. When you come in, you're going to have -1 tap. And it's one of those where now there is an option to kind of play around that, which is one of the things we always want to promote within the game, is that you should always, as an opponent, have an option against your opponent. You should feel like you are both playing the game, not that just one player is playing the game.
Yeah, that's very true. It's one of the good things I do like about Guild Ball at all, because the interactivity is still there, and there you feel like there's something you can do. You're not just sitting there waiting, and you might as well have a coffee while the other guy wins the game. And that's not a nice feeling for a game.
Yeah. I think that really about covers everything on Mother's Card. There's not a whole lot here to talk about. Now I remember I did just double check, there is one other change that we haven't mentioned, which is webbing. So webbing was another ability on Mother that was really good. Like, being able to just snap a ball that is near a nest marker is an amazing ability, particularly when you can place it somewhere, forget about it. Oh look, the ball landed near one of my nest markers, now Mother has it. So we made the decision to add a range to it, because that's another one of those counterplay things of, if Mother is not near her nest marker, she can't just for free snap this ball, which makes a big difference, because there have definitely been games that I've seen in Season 3 where it's hard to find a place to put the ball because there are nest markers in various spots, and it's like, well, if it lands near that nest marker, Mother just has it again and can score again. And I think that is the sort of final change on her card, so I guess we should move on to players.
Yeah, we definitely should. I guess we can start with the somewhat less changed ones. But we go for Harriet, just to have gone through her as well.
Yep. So, Harriet is obviously the newest model in the Engineers. I don't think anything on her has changed, and it's largely because she was a model that was designed a bit later.
As we missed it during the actual recording, I'll just amend it here. There's a change we didn't actually mention, so in the voice of God himself, Sucker Punch does not have a Guild Ball trigger anymore, mainly just to prevent people from having the potential to do the silly things people were worried about might or might not happen. The explode the world Sucker Punch madness never really became a problem. We rarely ever actually heard about it happening, but we changed it just to stop people worrying, crying about it. So says the Lord. Amen. Now back to your scheduled programming.
On in Season 3, so she was kind of designed with a bit of Season 4 in mind, and as a result, she was tested again in Season 4, but we are very happy with where she is, and as a result, we just haven't changed her. Her toolkit is really good. I think she's got some interesting stuff going on, but yeah, there's not a whole lot more to really say about her, other than I think she's still the good model she always was, and I think she's still an exciting model to use.
The only thing I can see is strange is sort of the sequence of the traits on the back of the card, but that's rather insignificant.
Yeah, we've tried to make more of a conscious effort to try and put things in alphabetical order, and it was something that we didn't have as much consistency on before, and it's something that, for the most part, we have kept to. There's there are a few reasons, certain cards that we haven't, and if you can spot them, there are kind of cool reasons why a lot of the time. So yeah, that's something to look out for.
Yeah, so a little Easter egg hunt for people. Then, so,
Yeah.
let's see. We covered Harriet. Then maybe one of the season 3 people. Oh, we have a look at Lotus.
Locus, okay. So aesthetically, he is this big hulking Mechanica. He's one of those models that you look at and go, he should be really difficult to kill. He should, be able to take an absolute beating and so on. And then I think, unfortunately, in season 3, he didn't really live up to his visual of this big hulking Mechanica. And I think in part that was because he was overshadowed by probably the hardest model to kill in the game, who I've already made reference to. So we've made the decision to give him tough hide. I don't think he had tough hide before. He just had reanimate, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, reanimate, stoic, and gravity well before.
Yes. So we made the choice that we were going to, take away that stoic, and instead give him tough hide, which makes him a bit of a pain to remove. 3/2, 15 boxers with tough hide and reanimate makes him not the easiest model to remove, and then on top of that, you've got gravity well to deal with as well. So he's become this much more of a tank that I feel like he always should have been based on his imagery. And then I think the other thing we can sort of talk about is the remote control. We have lowered the costs on that. It was one of those that we didn't really see the ability being used. So we made the decision to decrease the cost so that we can see it being used and so on, which I think is a big benefit for him. And then the other thing I think that has changed most on him is probably his playbook. And looking at his old playbook, you see a series of lots of double results. And this is one of the things that we've tried to cut down a bit on within the game, is these double results, because it's a case of simplification, and also it can give mixed messages about what certain models are meant to be doing. And you will see it most in certain models. There's kind of a joke within the office about some of the older playbooks where you look at the playbook and they are just crammed full of results, and you look at them and go, there's a lot of options. It's quite overwhelming to a new player seeing all these different symbols and results and so on. So we've tried to, in a lot of cases, streamline these playbooks and make them just easier to look at and easier to understand. What does this model do? And it's one of those where, you look at Lotus and you go, okay, so he's got knockdown on 1, he has the momentous pushes on his playbook, and he has a bit of momentous damage and a momentous tackle. So you can fairly easily look at him and you understand that he's a bit more of a sort of knockdown control model with the pushes, and then, in the right situation with perhaps a crowd or two, he can tackle a model, or he can be doing his momentous damage and contributing to the team. And that momentous damage result is quite important in engineers who don't get loads of momentous damage results.
Yeah, it's one of the few ones, actually. Ballista has one, and Harriet has some, I seem to remember.
Yes, I believe Ratchet has one as well, I think, further up his playbook.
Yeah, I think it's not that much more to say about him. We're not supposed to analyze each player anyway, so that will leave up to the great minds of the internet.
Yes, yeah.
So let's move on, shall we?
Yep.
So, well, we could take one of them like Salvo. He is not really... people have seen him already, so we'll not spend much time on.
So Salvo is one of those models where he's an example of a model where the design intent was fine. We knew what we wanted him to do. We wanted him to be this like midfield player that contributes to the team, and he has the arrow to the knee and so on, and the tether ball. The thing that we did really when we looked at him during the season was he fits that role. He's just not doing it well enough. you look at that sort of across the board with him, like Swift Strike's getting better, and just his playbook tweaks and so on, make him a model that is still in the same vein, but is just better at what he does. I think probably the most new and exciting thing on his card is Flawed Bolt, which those of you who have perhaps been playing the game for a lot longer will remember as a ability that we've brought back from earlier seasons. So engineers now have access to another range knockdown.
Like there wasn't enough range shenanigans on them as is. Let's have another one, shall we?
Yeah. And the Swift Strikes change to him is quite big, particularly with his heroic as well, because you can spend a momentum, take a Flawed Bolt or an arrow to the knee, then dodge 2 inches, and it definitely makes him, in some instances, that kind of model that can go for a goal that your opponent wouldn't expect. Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot more to sort of cover on him, other than perhaps with Flawed Bolt, I know that there have potentially been concerns about, more ranged knockdown, and like I said, it's an ability that used to be in the game that we took out, and we think that at this point within the game, with the changes to the core rules and the fact that you now have momentum if you go second on every turn of the game, we now think that these ranged knockdowns are more acceptable now, because though they are very strong and they do control people, they are not as controlling as they were in the olden days of Season 1 and Season 2.
So should we have a look at the really big guy? Colossus? At least model-wise, he's a really big guy.
Yeah. So, Colossus. Colossus is another one, and this is going to be like, the amount of times we're going to say this is going to be funny. You can kind of count them off. Colossus is another model that, concept-wise, we're very happy with him. He sees a reasonable amount of play, and he has some decent results, and he's just a good model, and a lot of the changes on him are more simplification and giving him just a few more things here and there, a slight tweak here and there, and a tune-up a bit. So things like giving him that momentum singled out on 1 is so big for him, and you'll notice that quite a lot of models that have this singled out on 1 have been getting this result of, it's now momentous. We went through this period of giving unmomentous singled outs, and time has shown that they're better off being momentous in most instances.
That is true, and he's gotten 1, and he also has the knockdown push as well on 2 rather than 3. He's gotten some quite nice changes.
Yeah.
But mostly he hasn't changed a lot. He can actually do a little more damage. Actually, he has the 4 damage instead of stopping at 3 as before.
Yeah, so, and this kind of plays into the engineer's sort of ability to take models out, and I think one of the things I find when I'm playing engineers is you're often having to make the choice of going for these unmomentous damage results, and as we said with Lotus, having a momentous damage result is a nice thing, but it's not a thing that you get on a lot of engineers' models, and giving him that extra 4 is sort of a nice extra incentive to take it. It may not be momentous, but you're getting 4 damage, so you can't complain too much.
Yeah, it's very true. You do get your 4 damage, and that's not insignificant.
Yeah.
If you look at the back of the card, he basically has less rules, but he hasn't changed much at all. He's lost his long legs, though.
Yeah, long legs is one of those abilities that it's a nice thematic ability, and it was a bit of fun, but I'm not sure how much Colossus was getting played for that, or how often it was coming into play, and also how many times people would actually remember that rule. And it's just one of those where quite a lot of the time when we were looking at cards in Season 4, it was a case of, does this model actually need this thing on the back of this card? Particularly with models that are quite dense. Like, Colossus already has, in this Season 4 version, has 4 rules on the back of his card, and that would put a 5th. And it's a bit daunting to a new player that they look at Colossus and go, oh, this is a really cool model, and look at the front and think, oh yeah, I can understand how this works. The playbook looks nice and simple. And they turn over this card to be greeted by a wall of just this ability, this ability, this ability, and that's why we took it off, essentially. It was never like a power level thing or anything like that. It's just a simplification of, does this really need to be here or not?
If one of them was going to go, that seemed to be the first choice.
Yeah.
Should we have a go at Ratchet then? I think people need a little excitement in between, don't you think?
Yeah. So, Ratchet. So, overall concept has stayed the same. Like, he is still this really good support model that the engineers have access to. And his stat line is remained pretty much the same, and it's mostly the abilities on his card that have changed. And I think even his playbook, I'm pretty sure, is the same as well.
Yeah, it looks the same as, he's lost the one double pusher on his last result, but beyond that, not much of a change. It's a fairly insignificant one. The biggest change, I'd say, is Blast Earth.
Yeah. So, Blast Earth, obviously in this edition, one of the things that we are doing is, you now, rather than measuring AoEs from the center, you measure from the edge. And you'll see quite a lot of, as a result of that, most AoEs have had their range reduced by 2. The one thing you'll notice though in the case of Blast Earth is that the range has been reduced by 4. So, if we were measuring AoEs to the center, it would have been 8 inches. Obviously it's 6 now. And honestly, the reason for this is, we are happy with engineers having a range game. However, we don't want to promote a range game that is standoffish and doesn't promote interaction and so on. And with a 10-inch Blast Earth, there was this ability to, shoot someone from quite a long distance away and essentially keep putting damage on models without engaging with them. And we didn't want to take that completely away from engineers, because in terms of how engineers are performing and their power level, we're very happy with them, but we wanted to just lessen that blow slightly, so they've got to get that little bit closer.
Well, it still remains the sort of big toolkit, as long as you don't get to him, though.
Yes,
he will generally go down quite quickly if you do manage to get to him.
Yeah, he's one of those models, he's a bit deceptive, is that in a lot of other guilds, 3-1 with 17 boxers would be considered like, oh, they're perhaps one of the more durable models on the team. In engineers, where there are quite a lot of durable, hard-to-kill models, he's actually one of the easier models to take out.
A lot, because he's one of the few ones that doesn't really have a very specific defensive tech, or reanimate, or tough hide, or something different.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing that we can really cover about his changes is Fixer. And previously Fixer used to just be Mechanica models, and one of the things is that we decided to remove this restriction because across the board we've looked at providing things like smelling salts has become more common with the game, the ability to remove conditions, and it felt only fair that engineers got to, carry on and be kept at a similar level. So the ability to remove conditions from every model has been added, and it allows us to do things like add these additional knockdowns into the game like we've done on the engineers if it's access to the ability to remove them through abilities like Fixer.
Yeah, true. You do have, however, kept your Mechanica overclocked.
Yes, yeah. It's a theme thing and also a power level thing. It's something that we wanted to maintain on him. His theme is that he is the Mechanica guy, so we wanted to at least maintain some of that on him. And overclocked is a nice way and a nice sort of synergy that you can promote within the engineers, that Mechanica models can get that free charge or sprint.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Right, we have more players to get through. So, we have one that's sort of like in between the guilds. So we actually had a little discussion just to make sure that could we talk about it. So we said, yeah, sure, why not? Compound. Really hasn't changed a lot, has he?
No, there's some very slight simplification to his playbook. We took away one of the results that we didn't see used that much. Then the other thing really is he lost chemical resist, which is another rule that was very corner case, and it's another example of, does this model really need this? How often does it get used? And then the other thing is just noxious death on the back. That has taken on the global change of just affecting enemy models. So that time when Compound dies, you don't have to worry about it hurting your own team.
So pretty much exactly the same. So
yeah, we're pretty happy with them.
It's one of the really efficient ones, isn't it? You can just keep him on one influence for the most part, if even that, and he'll still do a good job back there.
Yep.
Okay, but now we have 3 left, don't we? We have the velocities and hoist.
Where would you like to go first? Where do we want to go?
I think we should keep the 2 good ones for last, shouldn't we? I might be hated for this, but let's have a go at velocity first.
Yep. So, regular velocity. As Stig kind of alluded to there, is regular velocity is another one of these models that we're just really happy with within engineers. She has not changed a great deal. She's one of those models where it's at times hard to remember what has changed, if anything, because of how little has changed on her, because we are just happy with her within the game and where she currently sits. And the only thing really is there's been a slight sort of tweak to her playbook, just removing some results that weren't really used. And then the last thing, which is a bit more of a major change, is she has had a slight drop in health, which, given that this is a model that can go to defense 6 and just be an absolute pain, seems a bit reasonable, I think, because she is a very durable model. Being able to go score a goal, put yourself to defense 6, and just sit there threatening a snapshot with that 4-8 kick, it was really good.
It is really good, and I have been using it a few times as well for much that same reason. Just getting a goal with her, putting her in cover on defense 6, and laughing all the way to the influence bank. I totally get the change. Honestly, she probably needed that change.
Yeah. I find it's very hard previously to take an engineer's team without her, and I still think you're going to see her a lot because she is a dedicated striker model within the engineers, but I don't think you're going to see her all the time, and part of the reason for that is veteran velocity.
Yes, that is very true. She's become a very viable option. But you'll have to listen to Hoist first.
So Hoist.
And he has seen a few changes.
So I think
should we take the most significant one first?
See, now, I'm curious. What do you think is the most significant change? Because
You think I should start with that? Okay.
Yes.
I suppose that is fair enough. I would say the most significant is the loss of tough hide.
Yes, yeah. That is, his resilience was where I was going to go. So, Hoist, when he was reanimate, tough hide, and sturdy. No, I'm just going to say it. He was the most resilient model in the game. I can't think of many models that competed with him on that, and he was just a pain to remove. And it was one of those where we felt like he was just too difficult to remove. He presented such a problem for your opponents, and it was an achievement when you played a game and you killed him, well, you took him out, because he was often not worth the effort because of how difficult he was to take out.
Very often so, and he also has very solid counter attacks as well. So, for example, a 1H melee to lock him down, it's virtually impossible.
Yes, and so we had a look at his resilience, and then the other thing as well was that we used this as a point of being able to differentiate between him and Lotus. Was we made Lotus a bit more resilient to make them a bit different as well, because it did feel like in season 3, Lotus was kind of standing in Hoist's shadow in terms of resilience, and he looked like the one who should be hard to take out and really wasn't. And Hoist looked, this thin, spindly Mechanica, and was one of the hardest models in the game to take out.
They didn't feel like they were they felt like there was 2 generations of Iron Man, and the old one was the hard one.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah. So that's probably the biggest change on him. As part of this change, he did gain a few bits of health, so he's now 13 instead of 11, to compensate him a small amount in his loss of tough hide. And then the other thing, while we're looking at the front of his card, is much like a lot of these other models, his playbook has just been simplified. It's a lot of the more complicated results, or just where, if you look at his old playbook, he has 2 results on every single column. So there's a lot of options there, but it's also like a number of these options, I'm not sure how many of them ever got used. So just an element of streamlining there to make him easier to understand and easier to use.
Yeah, we also had one basically line of momentous results and one of non-momentous. Yeah. So for the most part, you would choose the momentous ones almost the entire time.
Yeah.
So I would say it's a fair change, and except for that, he hasn't changed a lot. But he is, as I said, a little less resilient, deservedly so. So now we can actually maybe enjoy killing him once in a while.
Yes, yeah. It's not going to be the achievement that it once used to be. And I think the other thing, and we haven't addressed this, and it's something that I think a lot of people have been speculating about, Hoist still has true replication. It is now on as a trait, because we've removed zero-cost character plays from the game, because there was the difference between a zero-cost character play and a trait is sketchy at best, so we decided to make most zero-cost character plays become traits or change in some way. And I think a lot of people, it seems like a lot of people expected this to go away, but it's such a defining part of Hoist. This sort of flexibility is an important part of his design, and is I think for a lot of people, a key part of why they play engineers is this option to have a model that can true replicate things. And with some of the changes within the guild, there's some new cool stuff that you can true replicate, like Flawed Bolt, for example.
Like Flawed Bolt, for example. Yeah. So I suppose at the moment, I think the fan favorite is probably Sucker Punch.
Yes, yeah. The other thing as well is that Hoist, to a certain extent as well, I think you have to talk about Hoist in the context of also the mascot choice, was I think that the fact that Hoist benefited so much from being able to take Burrow was also another reason that made Mother such a auto-include within that team, and we very rarely saw Mainspring, was because you were double dipping on this Burrow ability that allowed you to move and then also got your free attack. So with that having come down a little bit, perhaps we'll start to see Mainspring competing a bit more, and perhaps we'll see Hoist taking advantage of his abilities rather than Mother's.
Yeah, that's also nice. We should also note, the main meal. the big piñata, the big change. The Velocity Veteran. Aesthetically, really one of the defining models for maybe for engineers at all, almost.
Yeah.
Unless you're thinking of how it was to build the damn thing. But sure, otherwise it is excellent. But let's have a go at the Veteran Velocity and see the big changes on her. If you look at her old card and the new card, is there something that's the same?
She's still a Mechanica.
Fair, I suppose. Her character plays in the same place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say that she is Veteran Velocity is a complete redesign, and the main reason for this is actually regular velocity more than anything. So one of the things that within engineers, it was very hard to justify not playing regular velocity, because regular velocity is such a good model because she's in a guild that doesn't have access to lots of traditional striker models like Veteran Velocity, but wants to play the ball and wants a model like that. And as a result, it was very hard to justify dropping what is essentially your only dedicated all-out striker for a model that wasn't really doing that. And it was for that reason that we looked at Veteran Velocity, and we looked at the Veteran as being, well, can we do another striker that is different, that you'll want to take in different situations to the other one, and hopefully create this, rather than it being, oh, you always play one or the other, hopefully it's more of a player preference thing. Because functionally she is still a striker like regular Velocity, but she does some very different things with the toolkit that she's got. So I think the first thing we'll cover is that she has a high attack. Now, this is something like a little Easter egg that Perkins was like, oh, you've got to make sure that you mention this, is that original Velocity is TAC 4. Veteran Velocity has 2 more arms, so it is TAC 6.
Okay. I'll give him that. Fine, sure.
Yeah.
To me, it seems like there's like tons of more arms if you include the blades back there. But sure, 2 more arms, 2 more attack. Yeah. Let's go with that as the excellent reason.
So that's one of the things. The first thing is that she's more of this striker model with a high attack, which is not as common. Like there are a lot of models within the game that tend to be strikers, and like TAC 4 is kind of your typical striker stat line. So that TAC 6 gives her a lot more options, and she has a tackle on 1, so she is a really good model for retrieving the ball and taking it off of people, and she has that momentous push dodge on 2 as well. Now, the other thing that makes her quite different is, so regular Velocity has this access to acrobatics, which is a nice ability and very useful to have because it can get you out of situations. We decided to make Veteran Velocity different by giving her Route 1. Now, Route 1 has changed from Season 3. It was originally an ability on Brisket, and it allowed you to make a jog towards an enemy model that had the ball, whereas now you can make a jog directly towards an enemy model. So there is a lot more flexibility there, and you can use it to do some cool things and get an additional jog. And then the other thing that's interesting is it is a cost 2. However, you can trigger it off your second column of your playbook. So there is the potential for her to go into someone and use Route 1 to try and get out of somewhere and move into someone else. And she still retained the Defense 5 like regular Velocity, if she does have to take that parting blow, or, if you get into a really nice situation, if she is ever in the situation to wrap, which isn't going to happen very often, but if she ever is, if she wraps to that second column, it's pretty nice for her.
TAC 6 is high for a striker.
Yeah.
Isn't that the highest in the game?
So yeah, I think she is, I'm trying to think, I think she might be, yeah, so that's quite a big deal. And then the other thing, which is a unique inclusion within the sort of striker toolkit, is this knockdown, which we don't see a lot of strikers that have this knockdown, and it's a very engineers thing to have. They have a very reasonable access to knockdown within the guild, so it was nice to be able to give Veteran Velocity access to that. And
momentous as well.
Yes, yeah.
Tasty.
Yeah. So then she has 10 boxes as well, and this is with reanimate. So she's defense 5 with 10 health, which is slightly better than current velocity. However, she doesn't have access to nimble. So it's one of those where I think regular velocity is more survivable when you have nimble up. If you don't have nimble up, regular velocity is slightly easier to kill, but you are trading in for that lesser resilience on veteran velocity. You are gaining lend a hand, which is a nice ability to have. So when a friendly model gains the gaming up bonus from this model, the friendly model gains an additional +1 attack. So you've got this fast-moving model that is a goal-scoring model, but then has the option to help out in a fight, offering +2 attack instead of +1, which someone like Ballista or Pinvice is very happy about.
Yeah, you have Fairy Tale Land of things like knockdown, singled out, lend a hand, and so on and so forth. So these things are possible to set up.
Yes,
and they certainly make for an interesting new little extra tidbit. I would say when I saw this one, I said, okay, so this is more like if you want to be playing a game that's a little bit more on the takeout side than the normal velocity, then veteran velocity gives you a little extra punch, a little extra punchiness, basically, throughout, not only by her own fairly high attack, and her access to the 2 damage on 3 is pretty good.
Yes.
And also the knockdown being momentous, and generally she can do actually a reasonably okay job in a fight. Unlike a veteran velocity that couldn't probably not scratch the paint off a car.
Yes, and I think this is the thing as well, is that we're hoping that we create a situation where it's a personal preference thing, because, for example, when I play engineers, I'm much more of a ballista player, and I like to play the sort of more grinding attrition game, so where you are fighting, you are still scoring goals, but you are still having a presence in the fighting game. So I look at veteran velocity, and I think for my personal play preference, she's probably better because she's a model that, yes, I'm taking a slight hit on my ability to score in terms of it's going to cost me more influence, and she can't disengage as well, because she can't just pay 1 for the dodge. But having access to that +2 attack when they need it is really useful.
Oh, definitely. Well, I think we've gone through her quite solidly as well. She's a very interesting addition, and it'll be very interesting to see how the velocities are received, and actually how they are played, if veteran velocity actually gains a fairly good foothold. And I think we have a pretty good option there.
Yes,
if you want a little bit more punchy, I think she's a good option. But you talked about Ballista, so an amazing segue as always.
Yes.
We should go on the captains. Ballista has not changed a lot on the surface. Pinwise has changed some. But let's have go with Ballista first, of the simple reason that the non-changes are still changes, which are an interesting thing to look at. So let's have a go.
So Ballista is another model that we are very happy with. He is this interesting mishmash of abilities that make engineers what they are. He's probably one of the most engineer models in that he has this ability to fight on his playbook, the ability to tackle, and is a resilient model that can still score goals, that combined with some interesting character plays. And we have been happy with him for a long time, and we're happy with where he sits in terms of power level, that we didn't want to change anything too drastic on him. In terms of the changes that have actually happened, the main one, which is a global change, is Second Wind. Now, Second Wind as a character play was something that as Season 3 went on, we began to see it become more of an issue and leading to more of a standoffish playstyle. So what would generally happen, particularly within engineers as an example, is that they would be playing their range game, which is perfectly fine. They would be getting into range, firing off their character plays, then using Second Wind to then move further back. And this was something as well that I saw a few times, not only with the range game, but also being played with Pinvice as an example, is taking Decimate, putting second wind on her, Pinvice goes in and, kills someone, then second wind's out of safety. So we've made this choice to make second wind be a 4-inch dodge so that you know how far they're going to move, and also for a lot of models that means that you are more likely to have an option to interact with them. I feel like with engineers, it's still a case of you have that range game and you can still get out of threat ranges, but you don't get quite as far. But you're playing the range game rather than sort of yo-yoing in Pinvice and yo-yoing her out.
I suppose the best immerse of it, if you want to look at it like that, would be Veteran Decimate in Brewers going back and forth like a yo-yo.
Yes, yeah.
But we'll not go into her now. That's a very different discussion.
So that's main changes, and I guess the other change that we can really talk about is a minor one, which is Breach. So Breach previously used to knock down people that were on the ball path, and you'll notice that is absent. And this is just a case of it's a small part of that legendary play that made the legendary text a lot longer and more intimidating to read, and didn't seem to come up that much. Like, there were these occasional situations of where you lined that ball path up perfectly, and you were able to kick the ball and knock down a load of players, but it seemed to be used less than it seemed to a lot of the time not have an impact than did. So we made this decision in an effort to simplify that we were going to remove it from the legendary.
Yeah. That makes sense. Also, one thing I also noticed was the cost reduction of second wind as well.
Yes,
so,
yeah.
That's also worth mentioning.
Yeah, that's one of those where once we made that change to 4-inch dodge, there was kind of a instant comparison to certain abilities like Where'd They Go. And Where'd They Go is just a dodge that you get to make at any point during your activation and costs 1. So to us, it felt a bit unfair and overcosted for that to be 2 for a 4-inch dodge. So we put it down to 1 instead.
This might be a very silly question, but why does Ballista not have a Guild Ball result, but basically what would be a double Guild Ball result only? I saw it, and I don't see a specific reason why it has that, but still, it also makes me wonder if there's something I've missed.
What,
That he goes straight to the cup symbol rather than actually having the Guild Ball, which is the character play.
So,
or is that just because of it's more difficult to get to begin with, so it's like you get a big cup instead of the simple Guild Ball?
I'm probably like one of the worst people to ask, because this may have been something from earlier on where it may even be a hangover from way back in season 1 when Midas could true rep anything. And it's just one of those where it probably has never changed. In this instance, we just, took the double Guild Ball symbol and made it a cup with the new symbol. So yeah, it's probably a case actually where that probably could be a single Guild Ball symbol, and it's just something that we just, in terms of keeping the card similar, we just changed it to a cup symbol. But yeah, it probably could be a single Guild Ball symbol without anything offhand. I don't think that would make that a problem.
Well, maybe that's something for your design meetings another day.
Yeah.
It's just a little thing that I noticed and didn't really think of why, but there's probably a very good reason why somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's say that.
Yeah.
Other than that, he's changed very little. He still has his momentous inspiration, and he has his tough hide. There is little more exactly to sort of notice. Other than that, his playbook seems to be fairly identical to his previous iteration.
Yeah. It's a case of that him not changing that much is also a representation of sort of how happy we are with him. And we think he's basically working as intended. He feels like a model that represents engineers well, and he lends himself to a play style that we wanted within engineers, which is this sort of hard to kill ability to fight a bit with these accurate kicks, and then an element of the range game as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. He's sort of like the stoic defender in the back, rather than Pinvice, which is like pinball.
Yes, yeah.
But as in my absolutely perfect segues, let's continue to Pinvice. Huh?
Yes. So Pinvice. Pinvice is.
You mentioned this with the alphabetical order.
Yes.
Here we have one that has this tidbit. Are there other ones? Is this sort of the example of?
This would be an example of one with the controller, alternator, and deletion, or control-alt-delete. And it's one of those sort of little Easter eggs that we wanted to keep in because we think it's a bit of fun. And Pinvice is a model where she's received some changes, but a lot of them are simplification or just slight modifications to how we wanted her to play. So the first thing is just her playbook has been simplified. Her playbook had a lot of different results on, so we've taken this opportunity to streamline her a bit and also push her a bit more towards the football game. Previously, she had the momentous damage result on 3, and it was one of those where we want her to still be able to deal damage, but we don't want that to be her primary thing. It's a secondary thing. Ultimately, her main thing is that she is a football captain that has the ability to support her team with using controller, alternator, and deletion. And that's why you've seen some of the changes to the playbook and removing some of the results that we, felt weren't really as in keeping with her character. And she still retains some momentous damage, but it's not as easy for her to do. She has to work a bit more for it.
That's very true. Her momentous damage is just basically slightly moved up, so it's a little less accessible.
Yeah.
Other than that, the other abilities, controller, alternator, and deletion, their text is much shorter.
Yes, yeah. It's one of those where we decided, previously she had this heroic play that made all of her moles Mechanica, and all of these abilities used to only target Mechanica, and there was just a point where we thought, well, this heroic play doesn't really feel like it's justifying why it's there. We could just remove that heroic play and make these texts shorter. They don't have to refer to Mechanica. We just looked to essentially make things simpler and easier to read, and I think we've done that. And the other big thing as well was we've removed the damage from all these abilities, because previously they used to cause damage as well, and that's just another instance of simplification. There were also rules questions that used to come up with whether she was tooled up and so on, and how that affected the damage if she used the abilities on herself and things, and now that's no longer an issue. The sort of flip side to that is deletion has changed slightly as well. It is now only on playbook damage results. So one of the things we had seen happen with the engineers a bit was this sort of prevalence of the range game of where you would tool up a model and put deletion on them. Hoist was a good example. He would true rep the blaster, he would get the +2 damage and then, look to do 8 damage to a target. And we still want an element of that within the engineer's playstyle, because they need that to a certain extent to be able to get takeouts, because then, though they have fighting capability, they are not an all-out fighting guild, so they probably need to soften up their targets to be able to take them out. But we weren't really happy with how much having that double damage on the range character plays was incentivizing people to play in that playstyle, so we decided to limit it a little bit. And then the other thing as well is deletion has lost the bonus time. as well, which was just a simplification and power level thing. Lost the damage, but also lost that bonus time as well.
Yeah. So you gain a little and lose a little. In a sense.
Yeah, exactly.
You do get a fair benefit, but you don't take the sort of penalty that comes afterwards, in the sense that it's overly powerful ability for its cost.
Yeah, and I think the other thing as well that is good about it in terms of simplification is that previously the damage you suffered at the end of your activation, and it's one of those where that can very easily be missed, is you can put deletion on a model, then forget when you activate them that you need to put that 2 damage on them at the end of the activation. It was a very easy rule for people to miss, and that's often becomes one of the instances of a rule that we perhaps look to change or streamlining, because if your players are consistently forgetting it or are likely to forget it, you want to avoid it, because if people are likely to forget it, the chances are some people will, and that will have impact on games. Particularly an ability like that, where that 2 damage could be the difference between you taking out one of my models, and that's impacted your game by me forgetting it, whereas we try to, where possible, look for abilities that impact the player using them, and if they forget them, it's a negative on them rather than the other way around.
Yeah, that's very true. And it also makes things a little easier to get through the game and not have too much things to think about, as you want to keep the speed up at a certain level as well.
Yeah.
If you have a quick look at the back of the card as well, that's also significantly shorter, but mostly due to just the removal of the heroic play.
Yes, so back of the card is very similar. She's retained close control. She still has reanimate and so on. But the loss of the heroic play we've already talked about. It's just a simplification thing. It felt like you were sort of jumping through a hoop to be able to just use these abilities on everyone when, it was just simpler for that not to be there. And then the legendary play. So the Pinvice legendary is such an interesting one, and on the old card it's such a wall of text, because you're putting out these oil tokens, and then you can remove the oil tokens to make a pass, and then there's a stipulation that you then can't remove it after using a teamwork action, and then you have to remove the oil token. It's a long and wordy, complicated legendary, and we found that most people, were using it in the way that this aura happens is the first time each model receives a successful pass within this aura, the friendly model may immediately make a pass without spending influence, instead of using a pass and move or snapshot. And it gives a very similar effect. It is more restrictive, but it is so much easier for a new player to look at and understand, and has a lot less stipulations. And I think most of the time when people were using that legendary, they were using it for Pinvice herself, and I think it really plays into her aspect of being more of that superstar captain and so on. She will be the one going up and doing that. There is probably some cool ways that you can use it still, where you pass to someone, get them to pass to someone else, then you move Pinvice, and then that model that you pass to passes back to you, and things like that. So there are still these cool and interesting ways to use it. You just don't need to be spending tokens and have all these stipulations. So yeah, I feel like it retains a lot of the flavor of what that legendary was, but makes it a whole lot simpler for a new player to understand.
Yeah, very cool. And I think we got through every single card now.
Yes, yeah. So that is the Engineers in a nutshell, really. I guess to sort of sum up. Yes, a big nutshell. A big, tough, high, sturdy nutshell.
Definitely, and then some.
With close control. Because Engineers...
Okay, because why not?
I think the thing with Engineers, they have not changed that much, and it's one of those where, to an extent, that shows how happy we were in terms of their redesign when we went into Season 3. And a lot of, although they have had changes, they haven't had an extensive rework like they did at the beginning of Season 3. They've remained largely the same, and I feel like that anyone that likes their engineers now will probably still like them. They haven't changed as a guild. There's hopefully a few more options and a few more pieces have gotten viable and so on. And hopefully they'll just be easier for people to use as well.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think we've really used our time and thoroughly gone through every single one. So I suppose it's a bit time for a small summary, but you also managed to do that fairly all right.
I think the other thing as well was that there was a tendency while we were doing Season 4 to make changes just for the sake of making changes. And there were, in the early days of Season 4 when we were testing, we had a lot more changes on the sort of cards for engineers, like things like making certain players weaker and so on. And we got to the point of where we thought, well, it would be better to bring other stuff up if possible. And also, we think engineers are a very well-balanced guild. We're quite happy with where they sit within the general sort of power rankings of the game. They feel in a good spot. And we were conscious of, although there were certain things we wanted to change, we didn't want to mess up this balance that we had created. Because, you know, if we went too mad, and I think our earlier iterations of Season 4, we went a bit mad with some of the changes, we perhaps would have upset that sort of nice balance that we'd created. So we decided to be a lot more liberal with our changes.
Yeah, so that was the entire Engineers Guild, and that was a lot of players.
Yes.
And it was a lot of fun. There are a fair bit of changes to a lot of the core players, but they're not really, well, Hoist is still weaker, but he needed to be.
Yeah.
And mostly they're just a little flavor changes or simplification, streamline. So they're been in a pretty good place, as you mentioned to begin.
Yeah, it's one of those where their changes have not been as great as perhaps the changes in other areas within the game, but we felt like they didn't need to, and we don't want to just mess with things for the sake of it.
Yeah, I think that's a good design philosophy as well. It's something I actually hear quite a bit from some of our players that actually happen to be game designers as well for other things like video games and the like as well. It's one of the things they thoroughly enjoy of Guild Ball, that the changes that do come in actually mean something. They're not just done.
Yeah, and it's one of those, we're not looking... It's not like one of our selling points of a new season is, oh, there are 1,000 changes. It's one of those that the number of changes doesn't matter. It's about how meaningful those changes are and are they the right changes to make? Because, you know, we could, if we really wanted to, go in and change every single card, even if it's just a tiny bit, but they don't need it. What's the point?
That's very true. You don't fix something that doesn't need actually a change or a fix. So yeah, I think it makes good sense to keep things to a sensible level of fixing.
Yeah.
And we also have the engineers. So thank you very much for coming by here, Steve.
No problem.
It's been awesome to have you here on the channel.
Yeah.
And then I'll just say signing out here from STF Wargaming Studio. And thank you very much for coming by.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
And that was the Season 4 Engineers. Comment, like, share and subscribe, and support your hobby.